right. Good evening, a good Vok Shavua Tov. If you're watching on the replay, let us know in the comments. We love to know who's in the community, even when you're watching later in the day. And we are definitely all part of the same community. Just making sure that we are hitting Facebook and YouTube. So let me make sure that's coming in. And let's see who's tuning in tonight live with us, and where are you tuning in from? Who's in the house? Sandy McMurray is the first and says good evening from Michigan. Sue Strauss is in the house from Chicago. Welcome, Sue. Okay. Lindsay Adams says Shavua Tov from Ohio. Christo Cheney, welcome. Shavua Tov from Lubbock, Texas. All right, we'll keep an eye on the comments. Let me get my notes in front of me. And let us light up the darkness. Lovely. How you doing? How you feeling? Did you have a good Shabbos? This was the longest, or the latest ending Shabbos, not the longest, but the latest ending Shabbos of the year. So this will be the latest show that we'll have post-Shabbos. From now on, they're going to get a little bit earlier and earlier as we head toward the days of awe and the fall and the winter. So hopefully every time it'll be a little bit easier to tune in on a Saturday night. It's great to see you, my holy sisters and brothers. Julie Plout Warwick in the house from Seattle. Welcome, Julie, an old friend from high school. Bill Eldridge, great to see you from Berkeley. Paula Schmidt-Klauser from Chicago. Enid Goldstein, hello from Queens. Melissa says greetings from Great Neck, New York. All right, it's great to have you all with us. We've got a beautiful, beautiful daf today. So let's get right into it. We are holding Daf Kuf Yud Gimel, page 113 of Tractate Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 15, and tonight, with God's help, we'll discuss both Mishnah number 3 and number 4. We'll open our discussion of number 4. Here we go. Mishnah 3 is a quick one, so we'll discuss that relatively quickly, and then we'll get over to Mishnah 4. Mishnah 4 of chapter 15 of Tractate Shabbos, that could have been a more logical starting place for our discussion of Shabbos. I mean, particularly the Gemara on the Mishnah. Because there we're starting to talk about the essence of Shabbos. What is the essence of Shabbos, and how is Shabbos different? How does our lived experience of Shabbos differ from the days of the week? So we'll get into that momentarily. Okay, Mishnah number 3 of chapter 15. We're still discussing knots that you can tie on Shabbos, and knots that you cannot tie on Shabbos. So Mishnah number 3, it's a quick one. Why don't I just read it to you? One may tie a bucket with a belt on Shabbos, as he will certainly not leave it tied to the bucket, and therefore it is not a permanent knot. But one may not tie a bucket with a rope. Yet Rabbi Yehuda permits doing so. Rabbi Yehuda stated a principle: with regard to any knot that is not permanent, one is not liable for tying it. So let's unpack that a little bit. We've been learning that the general idea, and Rabbi Meir gave us a principle, that the general idea is that a permanent knot is something we cannot make on Shabbos. If it's a professional permanent knot, like a camel driver or a sailor would tie, then that's truly work done during the week, the kind of work that was done on the tabernacle in the wilderness, and one would be liable to bring a sin offering because you violated a Torah prohibition if you did that unwittingly. If you simply tie a permanent knot that is not a professional knot, you have violated a rabbinic decree. It is prohibited to tie a permanent knot. And a temporary knot is okay. What's a temporary knot? Like your shoelaces. Of course you can tie your shoes and you can untie your shoes on Shabbos. The principle that Rabbi Meir gave us is any knot that you can untie with one hand is certainly a knot that you could tie or untie on Shabbos. So there we think of our shoelaces, the strap of a sandal, and we're thinking in our minds a bow knot, right? Like the kind of knot we make in our shoelaces is normally called a bow or a bow knot. And that would seem to be a permitted knot on Shabbos. But now we're going to see that Rabbi Yehuda might question that principle. Okay, so the Gemara says, in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, does he permit attaching a rope to a bucket? So let's talk about this bucket. What we're thinking about here, the traditional image of a well and a bucket that you lower into the well. Now, you're not going to be able to get water out of a well in the public domain on Shabbos because the well is considered its own private domain if it's deep and large enough, and most wells are. And then if you move water from that private domain out to the public domain, that's going to be a different problem. You'd be liable for carrying on Shabbos. But assuming that the well is in the backyard, it's in a private domain, okay, well, we want to be able to get water on Shabbos. We're going to need water. We can certainly drink water on Shabbos. We could take that water out of that well within the private domain on Shabbos. But what if the rope that's attached to the bucket breaks? Now we have a problem because we know that we can't repair things, and we've learned that you certainly can't make a permanent knot. So can we attach a rope to that bucket? The first solution that the Mishnah suggests is use your belt. If your belt is long enough, and in Talmudic times, a belt it really is a rope. I mean, that's what they would use to tie around a lot of garments. And it might be something that goes around your waist a couple of times before you tie it. You can almost imagine the kind of belt that you use, on a taekwondo or a judo uniform. That's a long belt that you wrap around your waist a couple times before you make a knot. That sort of a belt you could attach to the bucket. Why? Because the assumption is that you would not leave it there. It's your belt. So you're not going to leave it attached to the bucket and in that bucket, which is now attached permanently to the well, and you might just leave it there because it's working. But if you did that with a belt, it's assumed that you're going to come back and make a more lasting and sensible repair than using your belt to haul the bucket up and down in the well. So that's why a belt is going to be permitted. And a rope is not permitted, right? Because if you brought a new rope, well, one might easily just say, okay, I fixed it. Now that rope stays. And that knot, which I wasn't really thinking about making it a permanent fix of the bucket in the well, ends up becoming a permanent fix, and we violated Shabbos. In fact, we're going to be liable for doing that because we made a permanent knot and fixed an object, right? Are we liable for that? It's a little bit unclear, and that's why Rabbi Yehuda adds this principle: any knot that is not permanent, one is not liable for tying it. The implication under Rabbi Yehuda's principle being, and if it is permanent, you would be liable, right? So you don't want to attach a rope and essentially fixing the broken rope that you use for hauling up your bucket from the well. So what is Rabbi Yehuda saying, right? When it says in the Mishnah, one may not tie a bucket with a rope, Rabbi Yehuda permits doing so. But then in his principle, he says if you make something that's permanent, you're going to be liable. So he's contradicting himself. The Gemara explains the rope that's being referred to in the Mishnah is not just some standard rope, it's a weaver's rope. What is a weaver's rope? I'm not sure exactly what a weaver's rope is, except to say that it's a rope that a weaver uses in his professional work. He needs that rope. So in other words, that kind of a rope is a rope that has a designated purpose during the work week. And if he uses it on Shabbos, so just he can get some water out of the well with his bucket, he's not going to end up leaving that rope on the bucket because come Sunday, the first work day of the week, he's going to need his rope so he can go do his weaving work, right? So that's why that rope would be permitted. That's why Rabbi Yehuda would permit it. So then we have a problem. So wait a minute. So if it's a weaver's rope, which is like a belt, it's clearly going to be temporary. Why do the rabbis say no? If the Mishnah refers to a weaver's rope, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda is permitting, why are the rabbis prohibiting it? Why aren't the rabbis on the same page with Rabbi Yehuda that you could use a weaver's rope on that bucket? It must be that the rabbis included the weaver's rope in their decree. Why? Because somebody might see that you have a weaver. They don't know that it's a weaver's rope. They don't know that you're a weaver. They don't know that that rope has some other purpose. They just see that it was fixed. And they might confuse the law, and they might apply it wrongly in their own case. Or, they might just think, oh, well, okay, there's a weaver's rope, but I'll just leave it there. So the rabbis thought to be a little cautious, to make more of a fence around the Torah, the weaver's rope is going to be included in their decree, no rope to fix the bucket. What about Rabbi Yehuda? If Rabbi Yehuda is saying that it is permitted to use the weaver's rope, does he then hold that the rabbi's decree is wrong and that they didn't need to make that decree in order to protect people from coming to use a weaver's rope mistakenly? Does Rabbi Yehuda hold that we don't need to make a rabbinic decree on a weaver's rope due to the standard rope? And the answer there is, in order to understand the answer, we get another teaching from a related baraisa. A severed rope may be tied with a bow, but not a standard knot. Okay, so let's say that the rope that holds the bucket in the well broke, but it's not missing, it's not ruined, it's not out of action, and that's why we brought either our belt or our weaver's rope. Let's say that the rope is still there, but it just somehow got cut. And if we just tied the two ends together, okay, so now we can get water out of the well. The rabbis say if you tie the two ends of the rope with a bow, like a shoelace type of knot, it's clearly a temporary knot, and so you can haul your water out of it. And because it's such a temporary type of knot, come Sunday, when the rest of the week is here, you'll tie a better knot that can go into permanent use, or maybe you'll just replace the rope altogether so there's no knot in it. But clearly it would be just a temporary fix so that you can get your water on Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says you could bring a hollow belt, or you could bring a sash, you could wrap it around the bucket, lower it in, and pull it out, but not using a bow knot. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a bow knot is a knot. He's saying if you tie it tightly, even though you could undo a bow with one hand, that was Rabbi Meir's principle for what is a temporary and therefore permitted knot to make on Shabbos. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a bow knot is a bow knot. And if you tie it effectively and strong, so even though it could be untied with one hand, what if it never got untied? What if people said, oh, well, the bucket works, it's fine. Just leave it. And it ends up staying there because it's a knot. It holds. Even though it's a weak knot, it could hold and it could be left there for quite a while. And so Rabbi Yehuda has a different principle for what is a temporary knot and what is a permanent knot. He's more based in results, right? Rabbi Meir's principle is more of a principle. Well, if you could untie with one hand, it's not really a knot. He's defining what is a temporary and what is a permanent knot. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's going to be left there permanently, it doesn't matter that in theory it's a weak knot. In practice, it ends up being, used as the knot. The repair just gets left there. I mean, think how often we make something that we just think is a temporary repair and it kind of works, so we just let it go. And Rabbi Yehuda is very realistic about human nature and the fact that people will do that. And so he prohibits the bow as a temporary repair because it is a knot after all. Okay. And the halacha, just to be clear, the halacha is with the rabbis. We can repair with a bow knot that is clearly temporary. The halacha is with Rabbi Meir. A knot that we can untie with one hand, like a bow knot, is considered temporary, and we can make such a knot just to haul up the bucket or make some simple repair that is clearly temporary so we can get our water out of the well on Shabbos. That brings us to Mishnah number 4. And as I alluded earlier, here we're going to learn some principles, particularly in the commentary on this Mishnah, which really could have opened our discussion of Shabbos 113 pages ago when we started Tractate Shabbos. Recall that when we started discussing Shabbos, every volume of the Talmud doesn't start on page 1, but rather on page 2. And our opening discussion on Daf Beis, right, the page 2 of Tractate Shabbos, was about somebody handing something to someone who's outside. And we started learning the principles of carrying on Shabbos. And we spent a lot of time in our journey through Tractate Shabbos talking about the principles of carrying, a lot of time, before we finally moved on to other prohibited labors. Here, we're going to be talking specifically about folding garments on Shabbos. But as we'll see, now we're going to get right into the crux of Shabbos, the real principles of Shabbos. What is Shabbos and how do we distinguish Shabbos from the other days of the week? So here's Mishnah number 4 of chapter 15. One may fold the garments after removing them even 4 or 5 times. And one may make the beds from Shabbat evening in preparation for Shabbat day, but not from Shabbat in preparation for the conclusion of Shabbat. Since one may not perform an action on Shabbat that is preparation for a weekday. Rabbi Yishmael says, one may fold the garments and make the beds from Yom Kippur, in preparation for Shabbat, if Yom Kippur occurs on Friday. And the fats of the offerings that were sacrificed on Shabbat are offered on Yom Kippur, but those of Yom Kippur are not offered on Shabbat, because the sanctity of Shabbat is greater than the sanctity of Yom Kippur. And to finish the Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva says, neither are the fats of the offerings sacrificed on Shabbat offered on Yom Kippur, nor are those of Yom Kippur offered on Shabbat. But truly, our understanding of Shabbat is like the understanding of Rabbi Yishmael. And that is why the title of today's show is The Holiest Day of the Year is in 6 days. Because it's true. The holiest day of the Jewish calendar comes every 7 days. Shabbos is the holiest day of the year. Most people, when asked what's the holiest day of the Hebrew calendar, they would probably say Yom Kippur. Maybe some would say Pesach, Passover. Maybe some would say Rosh Hashanah. Maybe some would offer other holidays. But in truth, the holiest day of the year is Shabbat. It was the first holiday that was created by God when God rested, and when God stopped creation and said, enough, now I'm going to rest, and so should you, because God sanctified the 7th day and hallowed it, because on the 7th day God rested from his work which he had made. And because Shabbat is that holy, that is why we go out of our way, and we have 150 pages here in Tractate Shabbos, and countless books written in the thousands of years since discussing what Shabbos is and how we keep Shabbos. And the very famous saying, I think it was an Israeli poet who said this, that more than the Jews have kept Shabbos, Shabbos has kept the Jews. And it's really true that we put so much attention into Shabbos because its holiness is so great. And as we'll see in our discussion of what this Mishnah really means, we're going to show how we make Shabbos so different from every other day. So we start by saying that we can't fold garments. Now, in terms of folding clothes, here's the bottom line. The only time that you're permitted to fold clothing on Shabbos is if all of these 5 requirements apply. All 5 must be true, or you cannot fold clothes on Shabbos. Ready? Number 1, The clothes are to be worn on Shabbos, on that same Shabbos. Number 2, one person does the folding, not 2. Number 3, the clothing is new and has not yet been laundered. Number 4, the clothing is white and not some other color. And number 5, the person has no other clothing that he or she can wear. Here we're given to understand that folding is not just like fold it so you can put it away in a drawer. Folding in ancient times was like you take a new garment, and because of the way you fold it, it's almost like you're pressing it, right? And you're making it look better, smoother, less wrinkled. It's going to improve the garment so that you can wear it that first time before it's even laundered. But the fact remains that even today, the halacha is that all 5 of these things have to be true. And since all 5 are so unlikely to be true, those 5 things that I just said, that the bottom line is, and it's here in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, we don't fold clothes on Shabbos. You just don't do it. It's so unlikely that all those 5 conditions are going to apply. In the normal course of things, they're never going to apply. And the rule is we don't fold clothes on Shabbos. And that's actually like tricky. You gotta really absorb that one because, if by mistake you're pulling clothes out of your drawer and then you're like, well, I'm going to wear this. I'm not going to wear this one. And you unfolded it when you pulled it out of the drawer and you're thinking, well, I'll just put it back in the drawer. But you can't fold it. Just put it aside and you'll fold it after Shabbos. And this is going to be, and why? Because if you fold it and put it back in the drawer, what you're essentially doing is preparing that garment during Shabbos for the time you're going to wear it, not on Shabbos, beyond Shabbos. And that's the principle that we do not do. Shabbos is so sacred, so holy, that we don't do anything during Shabbos in order to prepare for the time after Shabbos. So we don't make the bed. That's the second thing we're told. We don't make our bed on Shabbos so that we'll sleep in it after Shabbos. You could make your bed Friday night so that you could sleep in it Friday night, or even so you could sleep in it Saturday morning. But like when you get up Saturday morning, a lot of people are like, well, I like to make my bed when I get up. There's that famous speech by, I think he was a Navy admiral. It's a high-ranking officer in the U.S. Armed Forces who gave a commencement speech at a college. And he said, if you want to be an accomplished person in life, make your bed, right? And it's a beautiful teaching that every morning when you get up, as soon as you get up, if you make your bed, you've already accomplished something and you've got yourself off on the right foot. You're going to keep accomplishing things because you've already done something. He learned that, when he first started serving in the armed forces. And that's a beautiful teaching, but not on Shabbos. On Shabbos, when you get up, you don't make your bed because if you do, you're essentially preparing that bed to be slept in after Shabbos. So we don't make our bed on Shabbos. Likewise, and now that we're talking, and now let's get into it. And now that we're talking about these things that we don't do on Shabbos, because Shabbos' holiness is so much higher than the rest of the week that we're not going to do anything on Shabbos in anticipation of the rest of the week. We're not going to talk about our affairs, our mundane affairs. We're not going to talk about work. And let's just get into this list of how we distinguish Shabbos. The Gemara cites what we learned with regard to the following passage. So this is a verse from Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13. If you keep your feet from breaking, from pursuing your affairs on my holy day, and you call Shabbos a delight, the Lord's holy day honorable, and you honor it by not going your own way, from attending to your affairs and speaking idle words, right? That then you will be holy in the Lord's eyes, right? The verse goes on to say you'll have a reward for doing that. But this is the principle of Shabbos. On Shabbos, we dedicate ourselves to peace and to holiness, to coming closer to God and to our true essence. we celebrate, we give thanks, we give praise. And what we don't do is engage in anything related to the affairs of the workday week, to the work of the work week. We don't do that. And so the rabbis derived from the words, and you honor it, from the words you honor it, that your dress on Shabbos should not be like your dress during the week. You wear different clothes on Shabbos than you wear during the week. As Rabbi Yochanan would refer to his clothing as my honor, indicating that appropriate clothing is a form of deference, right? We show respect to God and we show respect to Torah by dressing up on Shabbos. The words going your own way mean that your walking on Shabbos should not be like you're walking during the week, and we'll discuss what that means. From the phrase attending to your affairs mean it is prohibited to deal with your weekday affairs and to speak about them on Shabbos. However, affairs of heaven, i.e. those pertaining to mitzvahs, are permitted. I was happy to read that because, to be ready to teach this class Saturday night, I have to learn the daf. I can't take notes on it the way I normally do during the week when I read it in the mornings, but I read it during Shabbos and I study it, so I'm going to be ready to talk to you. That's okay. Even though, it's essentially a job for me to teach this class. I love it. I love being here with you, but I have to take it very seriously. But because here I'm teaching Torah, this is the kind of thing you can do on Shabbos. You can't take notes. You can't violate Shabbos by writing or doing other forbidden labors. But, to talk about mitzvahs, to discuss mitzvahs, to prepare to do mitzvahs without violating Shabbos, this is permitted. The phrase, and speaking idle words, means that your speech on Shabbos should not be like your speech during the week. I.e., one should not discuss his weekday affairs on Shabbos. However, it's worth noting, it is only speech that they said is prohibited, whereas merely contemplating weekday affairs is permitted. It's permitted to think about the stuff you need to do during the week, but it is better not to. That's actually part of the halacha. It's permitted to think about the regular stuff you do during the week, but it is better not to. I would say that, and I once heard this teaching from Rabbi Yehuda Hoffman, that if you're going to think on Shabbos of asking this question like, what is my mission? What is my mission? What is my mission? How could I be doing more in the world? How can I be a better servant of Hashem in the world? And then you start to think, well, at work, I could be more proactive and we could be a better company and, we could adhere to better principles as a corporate citizen. It's kind of like get into how your work could have a better, essentially holier efficacy in the world. There you'd be thinking about your work during Shabbos, but you'd be thinking about it in a mitzvah context, right? That kind of thinking is okay. But if you're thinking, all right, I know I'm not supposed to talk about this, but on Monday, I just want to remember that I'm going to go to the supermarket and this is my shopping list. Better you should just put that thought aside and think about that after Shabbos. So just to review, how do we make the holiest day of the year, which is Shabbos, which comes every 7 days, how do we make it different than the days of the week, right? We've already learned that there's 39 prohibited labors that we can't do, and we've been studying them in depth for the last 112 pages. But when we think on a practical level, and not just what we don't do, but now when we ask ourselves, what are we going to do on Shabbos to make Shabbos different? So our clothes on Shabbos should not be our clothes from the week. Our speech on Shabbos should not be our speech during the week. So not only should we desist from talking about our work, we should desist from talking about mundane things. We should seek to be a little bit more elevated, to talk about holy things, to talk about mitzvahs, to talk about Torah, to talk about, ethics, to talk about being a mensch, an upstanding human being in this world, to talk about how we could do better, to talk about, heroism, right? If we've seen heroes at work, to tell their stories over our Shabbos table or with our families or with our friends during Shabbos day. That's the kind of conversation we want to be having on Shabbos. Our walking on Shabbos should be different than our walking during the week. So here we have a couple of ideas about what that means. One is that if you come to a stream and during the week, you're the type of person who would just step into the stream and wade across and get to the other side. This is more common in the ancient world where there wasn't so many paved roads and weren't so many bridges, and people didn't live in an asphalt environment, an asphalt and cement environment, and people wore sandals. So if they came to a stream, it wasn't such a big deal for them to just step in the water, get through. They live in a desert anyway. They're going to get dry pretty quick. No big deal. But what he's saying, what the Gemara is teaching, is if you come to that same stream on Shabbos, if it's possible for you to jump over it, better you should jump over it. Why? Because if you wade through it, if you just walk through it, your clothes might get wet. And if your clothes get wet, and you're already wearing Shabbos clothing, which hopefully you're doing, so then you might feel like, I want to get the water out of my clothing, and you wring out the water. That's a prohibited labor on Shabbos. So this is a little bit more akin to, our steps should be different. It means jumping over a stream. That's sort of to avoid doing a prohibited labor. But a different idea of what it means to walk different is that our steps should be a little shorter, right? Like we should adopt a different manner. Like we should actually feel different. It's an old teaching of mine. No one ever told me this. I just noticed it when I was younger, and I'll share it with you. If you're ever depressed, in a bad mood, angry, I'm not talking about clinical depression that requires medication. I'm not talking about that. But if you're just sad or in a bad mood, and a remarkably effective treatment is to go for a walk and to walk as if you're in a good mood. If you walk like a person would walk if they were in a good mood, it is astounding how fast your mood will change to match your walk. So if that's true, if it's true that walking like a person who's feeling some joy, some pride, actually makes us feel those things, then all the more reason that when we walk around on Shabbos, we should say to ourselves, I'm going to walk like a servant of Hashem. I'm going to walk like a representative of God on earth. I'm going to walk like an agent of God. We are agents. We are souls who were sent in this world for a purpose, with a mission. So walk like one. Walk like a representative of God in this world. We may not remember to do it all the time, but we should certainly try to do that on Shabbos. It is also, when we're talking about speech, that our speech should be different on Shabbos. So much happens in the realm of speech, much more than in the realm of thoughts in terms of what we can control. So we don't want to speak about mundane things. We don't want to speak about work. We also don't want to speak about painful subjects. Things that are going to bring us down, there's a place for them. It's important to have those conversations. But we try to avoid doing on Shabbos because we're commanded to enjoy Shabbos. So much of what we're discussing here is about enjoyment. Nina and I were just remarking today during Shabbos how grateful we are to have Shabbos, that, once a week, like we just have to stop and we can't, just let all of it go. No social media, no telephone, no TV, no news, none of that. It's by design that we cut ourselves off that way. We might join with our community and pray together or have a meal together, but we're cut off from the news of the world, and that's good. 25 hours, every 7 days of having that cut off, it's so beautiful. And by just, putting off those other subjects, to breathe. It's like we can breathe. And part of that, and the joy of Shabbos, because we're commanded to enjoy Shabbos, right? So one day a week, we have to enjoy ourselves. It's so beautiful. And so we avoid painful topics. And then one last teaching relating to that our speech on Shabbos should be different than our speech during the week is it's not a bad idea to speak less. Just say less. And then you'll be more in that holy frame of mind. Maybe you'll spend more time reading and learning. Just say a little less. Okay? And then, interestingly, the Gemara does object with regard to the fact that part of the way that we walk differently on Shabbos is that we might take smaller steps. That's why I think it's better, this teaching of my own. So walk like an agent of God, right? Walk like that. With regard to just taking smaller steps, maybe that's part of it. But the Gemara says we've also learned that one should not take long steps during the week as well, right? You should avoid taking overly large steps because it's injurious to one's health. I'm not sure why. That's just something we learn elsewhere in the Talmud. When we get to it, we'll explore more of the reasons. But the sages do teach that one who takes long steps all the time, it can be injurious to their health. And finally, on Shabbos, we shouldn't be running. If there's an emergency, of course you go run to deal with the emergency. But otherwise, unless you're running to do a mitzvah, unless you're running to fulfill a commandment, better not to run on Shabbos. And this does not apply to children. Okay, that's what I've got for us. Let me check your comments and questions. Jimmy Sunshine says, a man looks to me, it's like using a garden hose to make the ocean less salty. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that comment means. Maybe we'll come back to it if, I'm not sure what that means. Sorry. Buckthorn Studios, that's Lynn Job over on the YouTube side. She says, some types of cord are very slippery. If you try to tie a regular knot, it just comes undone. I wonder if this type of rope would be in the class of the weaver's rope and safe to use because you know it's going to be impermanent. Perhaps, but I think maybe what Rabbi Yehuda would say to you is, if possible, maybe not, it's not possible, but if possible, that kind of a rope, it would be better, instead of tying a knot at all, slip it around the bucket and just lower it in and pull it up, if possible, without tying any kind of a knot. Because this, you're making me think, if it's so slippery, is the bow not going to be enough? I mean, there are some kinds of rope that are so slick and sort of like plastic, almost cabling, that if, unless you put a really strong knot in it, it would just fall apart. And of course, that would be a danger. Okay, let me just see, is there anything else? And Barbara Thompson said, a lot of this could be avoided by preparing ahead and resting on the day. I mean, exactly. That's exactly right. And that's why Friday afternoon is crazy, because we know we're headed into that 25-hour period. We know it's going to be all about enjoying the day and coming close to God and close to our family and close to our soul and connecting with that higher soul that comes into us on Shabbos. And we want to be present for that and available to that. So to make a space for that, we prepare like crazy on Friday so that we're ready, right? That's exactly what we do. But no matter, how well-intentioned we are and how long our list is and how careful we are, sometimes something falls through the cracks, right? Or something just breaks on Shabbos, and then we have to know how to deal with it. I think that's all I've got. I just had a thought that crossed my mind. And I just want to say to Patrick Deneve, who says Shavua Tov from Bruges, from Belgium. Welcome. Great to have somebody in this community checking in from Belgium. We love that. So that's it. Oh yeah, the last thought is, it is extraordinary. If you didn't know this, right? If you grew up kind of secular, just not very religious, and then you start to come closer to Judaism and to practice these laws and bring it into your life, and then when you hear that Shabbos, is holier than Yom Kippur, and here we have a proof of that, right? You could make your bed on Yom Kippur so that you'll be sleeping in it on Shabbos. You can do that. But you can't make your bed, if Shabbos is the day before Yom Kippur, you can't make your bed on Shabbos so that it'll be available to you on Yom Kippur. The sanctity of Shabbat is the highest. And here is our source, our evidence for that from the Gemara. Okay, that's what I've got for us. Tomorrow we'll continue with this discussion of how, that inner life of Shabbos is different than the rest of the week when we continue, God willing, with Daf Kuf Yud Dalet, page 114. That's tomorrow. All the best, my holy sisters